Why do we game? Why do people play video games? It's a trickier question to answer than one might think. One person might play something like Resident Evil 2 Remake and really enjoy the atmosphere and assuming the role of a character. That person then might tell somebody else who's playing a mobile game, that's not a real game. Meanwhile, someone else can be shooting opponents in Fortnite or Overwatch and deride the very idea of playing a single-player story. In fact, one article I remember reading was about how someone got his grandparents to try a video game. A gaming journalist was playing Metroid Prime 3 while his grandparents were visiting, and his grandparents showed no interest in this gritty sci-fi adventure where the protagonist would explore a maze-like environment, shoot enemies, turn into a ball to roll into small spaces, and swing from hooks. His girlfriend suggested he show his parents a game called Chicken Shoot instead, a simple cartoon game about shooting chickens that had very simple gameplay and cartoon animations. He thought showing them such a simple game they had previously reviewed and given a score of 2 out of 10 was a stupid idea, but he took his girlfriend's advice and showed it anyway. And to his great surprise, his grandparents loved it and were having fun and laughing. It worked. He'd gotten his grandparents to play and enjoy a video game. Just not the kind of game that he'd ever want to play. And one that they enjoy for a totally different reason than why he enjoys games. This is because there are different types of video games, and not everyone plays games for the same reason. And not only that, not everyone plays the same game for the same reason. And this can cause arguments and resentment. Imagine in the 1980s a kid playing Ninja Gaiden while a friend who hasn't seen the game before watches. The kid beats a level, and the cutscene starts to play. The kid then pushes start to skip the story. The kid's friend complains, "Why'd you skip the story? I wanted to see it." The kid says, "I don't care about the story." And there you have it. Both kids are into the gameplay and the challenge, as it is an infamously difficult game, but one of the kids is also interested in the scenes that tell the game's surprisingly twist-filled plot. The other kid sees them as simply a waste of time that only gets in the way. Knowing that such differences can exist in two people who enjoy the same activity for totally different reasons, I've thought about it a lot, and I've identified 6 broad reasons why people play video games. Now, these are very broad reasons, and oftentimes more than one can apply to the same game, and not only that, the reason for playing the game can change with time. But here are the 6 general categories of reason to play a game that I've come up with. Self-challenge. The earliest known video games are perfect examples of self-challenge. Pac-Man might be the most well-known. Such games were about establishing a key play mechanic, and then making the game harder and harder until eventually the player loses. The goal is not to reach any kind of an end, but rather to see how far you can go before you lose, or how high your score can get. The reason for replaying these games tends to be to see how good one's skills still are. Nowadays, many mobile games fall into this category, fewer console games do. Movie. By movie, what I mean is a game that has a clear beginning and an end, where if you reach the end, you win. Today, most console games fit into that description, so it's a super broad description. This even covers games that have no story to speak of, like for instance the original Castlevania. In these games, much of the enjoyment comes from experiencing anything from the different locations of the game to changing themes or moods or settings or a story. It might be about how you fight enemies on a beach, then surf on the water, and then land on a ship and do battle on it. Or it could be about experiencing a movie-like story. But either way, such games are about the experience one has within the game itself, not so much from the challenge. This is why so many people who complete such games would gladly replay their favorite ones, not to redo a challenge that they've since conquered, but to relive the experience of playing as this character in this fictional world. Experience. Many games provide experiences that can't be done in the real world, or can't be done all the time. There are games based on real-world activities such as fishing, playing real-world sports, flying an airplane, and more. But an experience can honestly be anything. It can be running really fast, like in the Sonic the Hedgehog games. It can be exploring an enormous world and checking out all the hidden little areas, like in Skyrim or The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I'm considering such games to be separate from the ones I call movies, because in this case, it's specifically about a feeling you get from doing the activity in the game, rather than necessarily playing a movie. Sports. Sports can mean literal sports such as football and hockey, but it can also mean any competition. So Overwatch, Splatoon, Fortnite, all those count. Not to mention there's a reason why competitive video gaming for money is literally called esports. The thing about sports is that they have a large number of hardcore followers. Some of the most played video games in the world, in terms of the time spent on them, are competitive games. Much like how sports are some of the most watched shows on TV. A football fan may enjoy other TV shows, but they'll watch football again and again. As a result, NFL football isn't included when comparing the popularity of TV shows. Maybe video games should be divided similarly. I've noticed that despite my love of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which I poured 220 hours into, I put more time into Splatoon 2 at over 300 hours. Does it mean I like Splatoon 2 more than Zelda Breath of the Wild? No, but with an online competitive game like Splatoon, I can quickly jump into a match and have fun competing against strangers. With a game that I categorize more as a movie, the experience will eventually come to an end, and I must then choose to start over or move on to something else. Socialization. This is basically when the reason for playing a game is to be there, experiencing with other people over the internet, or in person. World of Warcraft is a perfect example of this. With this massive and diverse world, my dad got into it and played the game for years, often telling me stories not only of things that happen in the gameplay, but things that happen involving his interactions with other players. However, when my dad's friends lost interest in the game, so did he. While he liked the game's setting, theme, and very explorable world, his number one reason for being there was the people. When those people were gone, my dad was left with few reasons to stick around. Toy. Finally, their video games are basically toys, as in, you goof around in them. There's either no goal, or players don't care about the goal. A perfect example of this is Minecraft, one of the most popular games in the world. Players explore a randomly generated world, gather materials, and build things. Why? Because they feel like it. And it's a toy that's compelled a lot of people to keep playing. Like the games that categorize as sports, the games I'd call toys tend to consume some of the most playtime, due to being based entirely around an activity rather than a goal. It's not a coincidence that Fortnite, which could be called a sport, and Minecraft, which could be called a toy, are two of the most popular games in the world. Any video game that lets players create things in the game could be classified as a toy, even if that's only a small part of the game's design. That's because games usually fall into more than one category. For example, my dad enjoyed the setting and theme of World of Warcraft, which would make the game an experience, even if he was there mainly for the online social interaction as well, and often played it with his friends from work. Many games that can be called a movie, like Resident Evil 2 Remake, can also be an experience. For example, the experience of trying to survive in a zombie-infested building at night while also trying to reach a goal. Even simple games can fit into more than one category. Duck Hunt is a self-challenge game, but also an experience, of hunting ducks with a pet dog in a cartoon environment. It's a very simple game, but the simple gameplay mixes with a single, simple environment. The tall grass, the tree, the ducks, the dog that fetches the ducks you shoot down but laughs at you when you miss. Game companies have known about the importance of the experience of the game for a long time. This ad for a game called Super Battle Tank, from the early 1990s, sells people on the idea of it being a realistic tank simulation.
Missions where you'll take on enemy tanks, helicopters, and scud launchers day and night. Experience searing sound effects and spectacular graphics so real, you'll wonder if it's Super NES or CNN.
Gaming can mean many things. It can mean being immersed in and exploring a world. It can mean sniping someone halfway across a map. It can mean making a bird flap its wings repeatedly to fit in between the narrow gaps of pipes until you inevitably lose. It can mean building structures just for the sake of building them. I remember decades ago seeing a lot of talk about what it would take to get more people into video games. Nowadays, lots of people are into video games, just not for the same reasons, which causes lots of arguments and resentment between, say, console gamers and mobile gamers, and situations where one group of gamers says another type of game doesn't count as real games, when the, quote, hardcore gamers who usually enjoy a game for an immersive experience or a serious competition look down upon the, quote, casual mobile gamers who prefer self-challenge games that they often play simply to pass the time. After all, look at games like Candy Crush Saga. It tells no story, does not attempt to immerse players into an experience, it's not competitive, it does not allow players to be creative and build things, and is not about socialization. To someone who enjoys games for any of these reasons, seeing something like that be one of the most popular games in the world feels like a punch in the face. Nowadays, we are encountering something that worries players a lot more. Situations where companies focus on one group at the exclusion of groups that they formerly served. For example, EA once said that they'll stop making single-player games because the future is repeatedly charging players of online competitive sports-type games for in-game items or outfits. When games of one type become huge moneymakers, games of another type could potentially suffer as fewer of them are created, or less money is put into creating those experiences, and that scares people. It's not an easy thing to reconcile these massive differences between, say, the serious competitive gamer, the immerse me in a fictional world gamer, and the challenge myself while I wait in line at the grocery store gamer. Especially since, in their bid to chase money, companies can choose to stop making one type of game and move into making another. But that is what happens when any hobby or activity becomes mainstream. Times change, the reasons why people like to do it change, and honestly, it's no different than any other medium changing. In the 1930s, children's novels were about the exciting adventures of the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. Now, kid detective adventures are unpopular, and kids would rather read Diary of a Wimpy Kid. In the 1980s, action-adventure and story-driven cartoons ruled the screen. In the 2010s, cartoons became all about simple art styles and humor. There's currently a swing back to action-adventure and storytelling, but we'll see what happens. Likewise with video games. The self-challenge games that dominated the early 1980s gave way to games with a defined beginning and end in the later 1980s and 1990s, which evolved into even more movie-like experiences with storytelling and voice acting. And now, sports-like competitions and mobile self-challenge games are huge hits. If that's not what you're into, there's not much that can be done other than ultimately to vote with your wallet and realize that you may be in the minority. It's times like this we should be grateful that the gaming industry has grown massive and now includes a huge number of small companies producing a wide range of downloadable games, albeit mostly on small budgets. That way, we can at least be reassured that there is something for everyone. Happy gaming, everyone.
I don't do well in tight spaces. I'll pay back Eggman for putting me in this jam later.